I'm sorry.
When God restored the truth for prosperity, the devil put a signpost that says heresy.
I now separate you unto the office of the prophet.
And God told me to tell you this. It's always been in you.
You don't preach enough about sin. You don't preach enough about repentance.
All the hurt that I've gone through, in particular with the church in the last few years, I've been here before. Not in the same scenarios where I've been so deeply hurt by the church, but I was so angry at the injustice of certain things that I became an atheist. And I said, this time that's not going to happen because I have a different understanding of who God is now. And I'm not going to blame the circumstances of mankind on God because that I don't believe he's instructed them to be like this. I can see why a lot of people, when they've been hurt by the church and faced trauma or just faced general gaslighting and people shutting down and vanishing when they're in the most pain they've ever been, I can see why they not only deconstruct their faith, but go, see you later, church, I'm never attending again. It's not because they question the goodness of God anymore, it's they question the goodness of the church.
What happens when cancel culture meets the church? How many stories of pain get buried to protect a reputation? Is cancel culture the only path to accountability, or can churches change from within? You'll hear from British journalist turned pastor Carrie Lloyd, who spent nearly a decade working for a US megachurch before finding herself on the receiving end of cancel culture, only to walk away burnt out, broken, and forever changed. This isn't just her story, it's a bigger conversation about power, platform, and the troubling patterns we're seeing play out across Western megachurches. I'm Elisha Foon, journalist, storyteller, and I believe everyone you walk past has a story, and that story could change your life. So let's crack it open to discover the news in you. Carrie Lloyd began as a journalist who straddled two worlds. First, it was marketing and media, and then her reconversion led to her moving across the world to serve in a Californian megachurch. She became a preacher, author, and podcaster, known for her thoughtful take on faith, purity culture, and spiritual growth.
Come and stay a while amid the British charm that is called my brain. I'm a journalist and pastor in California, but don't hold that against me. I wasn't brainwashed. I chose to leave my atheism on my own accord, consequently after 2 sips of Kool-Aid. But that's for another time. These opinions are my own, most of the time. The humour was learned of a book.
But behind the scenes, Carrie found herself navigating the complex politics of church leadership. Her megachurch chapter came to a painful close in 2020, shortly after questioning church practices and advocating against abuse within megachurches. She found herself caught up in controversy. We can't get into the specifics of Carrie's exit. Legally, she's not allowed to. But what she can share is the emotional aftermath, the feeling of being cancelled from the inside out.
These things have taken place and no one is accountable. And what's worse is that I'm labelled as the problem kid, if that makes sense, when I'm trying to challenge some of these issues. And so again, I'm being very cryptic. I'm sorry I can't be more clear, but just for covering and NDAs and all that jazz. Cancel culture is an important part of challenging injustice. But I also think there are lots of times we hop onto boycotting something very quickly without having a conversation. So that's what I mean about my experience of like, wow, everyone has concluded without what my story was, without me even being in the room. And in fact, they took the information from other people that have never had a conversation with me either. And so no one actually knows what this story is without you coming to me. And I remember sitting down with my friend, one after another, and probably about 10 of them over lunch and going, this has been the journey. This has been my experience of this whole story. And I don't know what I want. I don't know where I want to move. in this journey or not, whether I want to say I'm out of here or whether I want to buy into this idea. But what I can tell you is these things did not happen. These things did. And so my heart's clear. My character is pure in this journey. But I also feel so terrified that everyone has made a conclusion about me and made a conclusion about what this looks like. And equally, I had a lot of questions of my own, challenging some of the integrity on the other side of this story. And so I had a lot of questions myself, and I had a lot of compassion for those that were very confused, but I wish they'd come and talk to me rather than make their own conclusions and cases. Go and talk about that to therapists, and those therapists then shared it with other therapists, which, by the way, you should have been fired for that too. And I did have a couple of therapists come back to me and apologize for sharing confidentials that should have stayed within that room. But again, they projected their own fears and made their own summations, and it made my life hell. I remember some people sending me pictures and of screenshots where these people were following my account, and it was a private account, but they had followed my account, which I would accept if it didn't look like some random spam bot. And then they had taken photographs and then put it on public forums, which obviously, apart from the fact that it's copyright infringement, they would again take out of context things that I was saying, things that I was doing, or just making bullish comments. Then the problem we got now is that if we're looking back to 100 years where people were being lynched in a town square and people came to watch it, well, you can't hide behind a screen and you can't hide behind an avatar that looks like Pocahontas. You're there with your face. These days, the bullying amps up because no one has to be responsible or attach their ownership to it. Anyone that's actually hiding behind a screen or sharing an opinion behind a no-name attached profile, well, what a massive coward. Why aren't you doing this by your own? Because you know that you're bullying someone, or you know that you're creating an attack or an assault on someone, and you know deep down that that's wrong. So either go and have a private conversation with someone and actually start feeling the effects of having honest conversations, both good and bad, because I've loved it when people came to me and asked me directly instead of concluding.
Carrie poured her heart into church. Early mornings, late nights, comforting others, until whispers behind closed doors turned into walls, closing in on her. The church, once a refuge, became a cage. Growing increasingly disillusioned with the culture of secrecy and lack of accountability among the leadership, she sought to reclaim her voice and heal in a new environment. Eventually, she sold her home, packed up her life, and left the American church behind, returning to England to start afresh.
I'm feeling quite emotional, really. You will fight for far too long when you've been facing a lot of abuse and a lot of unkind things happening to you. My cousins and my mother and my family have been like, if you don't draw the line in the sand, we will. And it wasn't an intervention, but they were like, this is painful to watch people be this painful to you. I have a lot of really great pastor friends with really amazing churches in America. So when I talk about leaving the American church, I probably would say I'm leaving megachurches. I don't think there's accountability to a lot of them. And we had, 30 megachurches in the 80s, 60s, 70s maybe. And now we've got 1,800 in America. And with the hundreds, if not thousands of hours that I've done in coaching, majority of the hurt is coming from megachurches because there is too much busyness to actually disciple people. And there is too much focus on going global, going big, that we have lost compassion because we're wanting to protect our reputation. We're wanting to protect our name or our brand. And we're wanting to protect perhaps our own ego and our own families within that megachurch. And so what I found was my heart was broken because I think there are lots of times where people will abuse the culture of honor and they'll misuse it to their own advantage.
Megachurches have revolutionized American religion since the 1970s, merging entertainment, consumer culture, and religion into mass productions that attract thousands weekly. While they offer accessibility and spectacle, they also risk diluting genuine human connection and masking systematic issues. Carrie's story reflects many stories of people who attend, volunteer, and even take paid positions as preachers or pastors of a church. There's a pattern of burnout, exploitation, disappointment, trauma, and sometimes abuse. Although there are many examples of church failings in the West, church hurt and a knee-jerk reaction to cancel culture is a feeling experienced around the world with many megachurch faith communities who are now reckoning with hidden truths buried beneath the pulpit.
I love America, and I can see great hope in the future from a lot of really amazing pastors and amazing people that really have got in ear to the ground. Not that we're going to become so malleable that we become spineless, but actually we're going to listen to repetitive patterns of behaviors. And if we're not willing to listen to them, then we have a real problem. We have a real problem on our hands. I got 25 pastors at the moment that are so hurt and so upset by actions that have been taking place from 1 or 2 or 3 different churches because senior leaders are unwilling to listen to feedback. Then you're going to have to start waking up to a revolution that's going to start coming, because it's about, are we humble enough to take feedback? And that also looks like sometimes that you think we're disagreeing with you, but don't get so big in your own empires that you think anytime someone's bringing a concern that they're accusatory. They're not. They're actually facing injustices that you are not waking up to. One of the things that I would really like to see more of is removing everyone off this pedestal nature, the celebrity culture around Christianity, and also the celebrity culture around any kind of powerful leader. Because what it does is it creates an invincibility from them, and they start to remove themselves more and more, and we lose less and less accountability from them. We actually make it worse by putting them on that pedestal in the first place, and or wanting to throw them in the fire. It's one or the two, but either way we isolate and we stop to do community and conversations that are much healthier and much more rewarding. And so then it creates these chasms of hurt and brokenheartedness.
The fall of megachurches is becoming more common. In 2022, New Zealand's largest megachurch, Arise, with 10,000 members and 13 campuses, were caught out for secrecy, abuse, and control. Journalism and media investigations cracked open a can of worms.
Arise Church management has spoken exclusively to One News as the under fire leaders of the organisation resign.
The most important thing to us at Arise, we are committed to loving people.
Over 500 members were interviewed, revealing centralised power, toxic positivity, a heavy performance culture where questioning leadership was taboo. Interns reported long hours doing tasks like cleaning, driving, babysitting, even gardening for pastors, alongside allegations of bullying, manipulation, and sexual harassment. The New Zealand government even investigated, and an independent review by a crisis management group called for urgent leadership change and the board to step down, citing how volunteers and interns were exploited. The church's founder, John Cameron, and wife Gillian stepped down and left Arise altogether. The church also refused to make public findings of their investigation. Arise was modelled after Australian church Hillsong, which has faced its own controversy. It also brought in more than $10 million a year.
When you walk in, you get a bit like, wow.
It was all about the show.
There's not one person in this building who doesn't need more money.
I remember the early days of Hillsong where it was genuine.
It's time for Brian Houston to face the music.
It could be up to 5 years in prison.
There's something happening in the spirit realm tonight.
But recently, Hillsong was rocked when one of its star pastors was fired and accused of multiple affairs. In the wake of the scandal, new accusations against other church leaders continued to come out.
Hillsong, famous for its worship music and celebrity ties to Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez, has also seen high-profile leaders step down amid reports of moral failings and financial mismanagement. With campuses distancing themselves worldwide, many are now questioning the church's very foundations. As ministry lines blur with personal enterprise, pastors gain millions of followers, holding celebrity status, and churches risk becoming private revenue machines or family-run businesses instead of becoming spiritual houses, a refuge for the broken to become believers.
It gets very dangerous when you see the repeated patterns from the same people over and over again, and you come in thinking that you might have a voice, thinking because you're a pastor in the environment yourself that they might listen to you because you're coming with a concern for them, not as much as for but hey, you guys could go into a lawsuit if you're not careful. So I think it's really important to change the legal protocols about how you do some of these things, because I think you guys started from a very small church of 30 people and you blew up no one came in from business, no one came in from corporate that told you this stuff is actually illegal. I don't think you're intending it to be that way. But if there isn't any feedback culture, if there is no room to go, well, that's not good that we treated you that way, that's not good, we need to address this quickly. And that was just happening over and over again. And it just broke my heart. We've also created an environment where don't say anything to them because you'll be seen as accusatory, or they might even, at worst, they're going to call you demonic. Then it creates a very heartbreaking experience for the person that served this church for a long time. It's funny, I was actually having this conversation with a really brilliant clergyman in England, and we were talking about how we don't really have huge amounts of celebrity culture over here. If we do, it gets dangerous. And then again, we go into these scandals where they've removed themselves from normal living. They've isolated themselves. They're not like St. Paul sleeping on crates doing his ministry. Now we've got green rooms and making sure that everyone's taken care of, And I appreciate the kindness of hospitality like that, but can we make sure that we're not removing ourselves and trying then to put on this great facade? How much of this is pretend? And how many times are these sermons passively aggressive, having a communication issue with someone else in leadership or someone else on staff? There are just too many times now where communication and confrontation is not done well.
Many pastors are compromising to stay culturally relevant, chasing celebrity endorsements and courting the elite. Over time, favoritism and preferential treatment replace care for the poor and vulnerable. Even with good intentions, fame and fortune distort the mission, and the marginalized, the poor, the widows, the sick are forgotten. In the Western Church, especially in America, spirituality gives way to self-help, and pastors, once called to shepherd their flocks, begin to resemble personal development gurus more than spiritual advisors. Is there a safe, transparent way to raise concerns within churches? When allegations do surface, what does real accountability look like? Are independent investigators brought in? Or is everything handled internally, behind closed doors? For Carrie, questioning became taboo, and therefore the truth was a threat.
I love my mother's church, right? And it's 30 people. They've been doing life with each other for decades. No one's fallen out with each other. There's no gossip. No one's on a pedestal. No one's waiting to speak to the pastor afterwards. We're all embedded in the community. They don't have much in the way of wealth, and I think that's okay to not have a prosperity gospel. Of course, God wants us to prosper. But I think when we start to create this power hierarchy thing, then those people become less accountable, and it becomes incredibly worrying, because now they're starting to protect all of their world and their families, and they're trying to protect everyone from this journey of actions that actually need to be challenged. And, at some point, it does all start to crumble down. At first, you'll start to see financial degradation happening. So this is where you start to see the favor being removed. So it may not be that people are being accused of sexual perpetration or inappropriate behaviors in the workplace. They may not start there, because when people have tried to, they've been fired, or they've been removed, or they've been outcast. It's more about the fact that people are like, I don't know whether we can trust you anymore. And so that's when it starts. And then people will start to get stronger voices. they'll start to go, hang on a minute, we're not letting this one go now. This has been repeated over and over again. And also generations change and age out, right? So as generations, the oldest generation we have at the moment still often sweeps things under the carpet, pretends it doesn't happen, doesn't confront the issue and moves on, and almost sees any challenge or any negative confrontation as accusatory and unkind and disrespectful. That doesn't really work in an environment where it's incredibly disrespectful to have people's sexual perpetrations taking place in the offices of your building. We've got to start creating more room for feedback. We need to start having more legal protocols around allowing feedback to happen. In business, we have 360 appraisals, which is where the manager is reviewed from us as much as we are reviewed by the manager. And so those 360 appraisals are incredibly important, but you can't have it from people this is the problem, right? The accountability thing within the church, where everyone's working for that person. So who's he actually accountable to? You've got a bunch of elders, maybe let's say on the church side of things, you'll have a board in a business or a non-profit, but that head of the non-profit could fire all of the board if they don't like what they're saying. And I have seen that happen where everyone has come with a challenge and intervention towards the head of a non-profit. They've not been behaving themselves, but they refuse to acknowledge or take ownership of their behavior. So they fired the whole board and carry on regardless. So they actually create their own carnage and chaos just by avoiding the very things they need to challenge. And I remember once being told, oh, this person wants to come and apologize to you. And so I go and have this conversation and they don't apologize. They justify what they did. And not only that, they brandish an awful lot of labels and conclusions on me. And I left feeling more heartbroken after that meeting. And so I challenged it with a letter saying that wasn't great. That wasn't good at all. And these are the things that I know you've said and done. And this is hard for me to feel safe in this environment because of these things. And then it's just a more defense. And so you just kind of go around in a circle until you go, I've got to let you make this decision that you think you're right. So I have to go and thrive somewhere else. I have to go and find these smaller communities that are sacred and beautiful and steward the gospel in a way that is so kind to each congregant that I just see. And I think there's so much focus on revival. I'm like, can we also focus on compassion? Compassion always precedes the miracle. And it doesn't mean to say that we can't be challenged. It doesn't mean to say that we aren't accountable to our own responses and reactions, for sure. I've definitely been too angry in moments where I wanted like a dog with a bone with this moral understanding of what's gone on. And I'm not in a position that anyone's actually listening in this moment in time. So I have to be okay with that. And I have to walk away. And yet there are other people, really good people, full of justice, full of kindness, full of compassion in the Church of England, in churches in America that are like, yeah, we've seen that before. And so I think there is this journey of like, I'm always going to keep the door open for them, but don't try and believe in them more than they're willing to believe in themselves in these moments. And I'm just going to let, in my case, God do whatever needs to be done in that scenario. And I just have to be reliant now on going, the truth will come out and the truth will set us all free.
Carrie's time in the church left her feeling unsafe physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The rumours, assumptions, and gossip she faced took a toll on her health and nearly broke her spirit. And the cost of staying was just too high.
I got very, very sick for a long time, partly from how people were talking about me, because I really do think if people are incredibly negative about one particular person, it does create, there's been muscle testing on this. I was always really fascinated with quantum physics and sound frequencies and how sound can affect the strength of someone. And this is when I was an atheist, and Dr. Emoto, he did that lovely Hidden Messages in Water. You'll hear a lot of people talking about this, where people speak hate over a glass of water for a week, and then in another room with exactly the same conditions for the other water in another room, they're speaking love over it and under a microscope. The love one looks like a snowflake and the hate one looks like oil slick. So it changes the molecular structure of us. And that was very real for me. So moving back to England, I've actually, my physicality and my health has got a lot better. And don't have an enlarged thyroid anymore, and nothing's really changed in my diet. And I used to think that I was fairly resilient. And I worked in the advertising industry. If you can work in that industry, which is one of the most decadent industries in the world, then you can work anywhere, quite frankly. But because it was church and it was seen in my eyes as the safe spot, the refuge, the house on the hill that you run to when you're in danger, now all of a sudden it became the most dangerous place for me to be. I wasn't protected. I was not covered. And I felt incredibly alone.
Since 2020, over half of US pastors have seriously considered leaving the ministry, and more than 40% have thought about leaving their congregations. Many say they feel worn down, unsupported, and disconnected, raising the question, is the church system broken? Even voices from within, like respected megachurch pastor Francis Chan, has walked away from the model in search of something more authentic.
I remember one night telling my wife, because I had a church in Simi Valley, and one night I just looked at her and a thought came to me. I go, honey, I feel like if the Apostle Paul or Jesus had a church in Simi Valley, mine would be bigger. And that is bothering me. I would have a bigger church than Jesus. If God could have anything of a church, what is the main thing in Scripture? And there was such a emphasis in the New Testament on loving one another as much as Christ loved us. Like, do I really care about you? Like, genuinely, like Jesus loved the church, to where I go, look, anything, I'll give you the shirt off my back, whatever you need. Like, that's what he wanted. And so I'm like, that's not what I created. I got a bunch of people, thousands of people. We're planning churches. We got, podcast is going crazy, but are we loving each other like that? Gosh, I can let go of the numbers. I can let go of the fame, the money, everything else. That's where I tried to change the church. I didn't know how. And I finally thought, I think I'm causing more problems than I'm helping the church. That's when I decided, let me step away and maybe get my thoughts together and maybe create something different.
Many churches share the same DNA: charismatic leaders on pedestals, layered hierarchies, closed-door decision-making. Does image really matter more than integrity? As cycles of abuse come to light, the trail often leads back to money and unchecked authority. Has there been financial mismanagement? Is trust quietly eroding from the inside out? How are abuses of power dealt with? Are people leaving in record numbers? How are women's experiences acknowledged or silenced?
The biggest part about gossip is that it creates its own narrative before actually going to that person. It started with some very fundamental members around my world that people believed, but none of them had come to me. None of them had recognized I was grappling with what to do. I didn't know what to do in this scenario. And I didn't have any leader that was safe to talk to. And that terrified me because this had been an environment I'd served for a long time. And so I felt incredibly unprotected and very unsafe. And to hear people that I'd stepped in a room and really fought for with their own issues, with their own journeys, with their own personal confidentialities, I would step in a room and fight for them. They were doing the opposite for me. And that broke my heart, that I'd served and worked so hard to defend and take care of other people's names, whilst these people were literally spending half their day talking about your life that they didn't know anything about because they'd never come to me.
A key part of cancel culture is the power of unchecked narratives. We tend to build cases around people without ever questioning our own bias. Fragments of gossip and outrage become the whole truth in our minds. We forget there's always another side to the story, and every human being deserves the chance to tell it.
There's this very disturbing pedestal behavior that happens within the church. It becomes a case of you're no longer human, and you're no longer allowed to explore a subject or a thought without being vilified for something else. And I was accused of things that I had never done. And equally, I'd been aware that I could never really explore my own feelings on something because everyone had made a commentary or a decision for me. And that terrified me too. The rumour and the gossip is almost intensified in the church environment because everyone believes they have an obligation and a moral right to tell you, as someone that is also a public figure, what you should and shouldn't be doing morally. Now, in some ways, I agree with that. However, let's not go on a witch hunt trying to find something you're doing wrong when you're not doing anything wrong. I've seen an injustice, let's say in a church environment, I've seen an injustice or I've seen an illegal protocol be taken place, whether it's towards myself or towards someone else. I raise it as a concern, and I raise it a few more times because it was ignored. And because I raise it a few more times, then the deflection comes back saying they're demonic, they're bitter, they have issues. And so this building on of cases is often a lack of not taking ownership of our own understanding of ourselves or looking at ourselves when other people are experiencing us. They really do want to believe whatever they want to believe. And the truth is not really all that important.
Cancel culture can hold authority accountable when formal systems fail, but without safeguards, it risks becoming spiritual abuse, condemning without hearing. A lack of clear legal framework and vague moral codes create dangerous grey areas. Are boards diverse and brave enough to challenge injustice? Or are they a circle of yes men protecting the institution instead of the people it's supposed to serve? Will churches put financial safeguards in place, or let unchecked power breed a new class of religious moguls? Many donors remain unaware of where their money goes, but as investigations grow, the truth is hard to ignore.
So cancel culture, in the sense of boycotting, is actually often very useful, especially in regimes of power and authority. And I do think we're starting to get to that in the church environment now. But I actually found it easier to work in the secular world because we have more legal protocols in the secular world. Things that would be like, oh, hang on a minute, sunshine. If you were doing this in business, you'd have been fired. And yet, because we don't want to come across as dishonoring, we don't want to look like we can't submit to authority, I think people have been taking advantage of that. So I remember bringing something to a leader 2-3 years ago about something that happened 7-8 years ago. And when I asked that leader, did you do or say anything to them? Did you challenge this? And they went, no, I didn't bring it up. Instead, they thought that I was creating conclusive criticisms about them. And I'd also been aware that this person had done similar conversations with many different people. And that person is still working today in the same position without any challenge of what they've done. My conversation is like, what does legal protocols look like for pastors, with students and congregants? Because we're in a lot of trouble right now. And I think we feel like because we're in authority or these people are accountable to us, we get to ask very invasive questions that we are not trained to be asking. And we are not therapists, we are not counselors. We haven't had that kind of training. And we certainly haven't been given any training for psychological safety. The best way we can handle things that are an injustice are private conversations that we go to directly. And if they're being ignored, if no one's actually acting on any of it, then we take it to the courts, then we take it to lawyers and give all the evidence. And so we have this abuse of injustice all the time. But what we must make sure is, as our own individual person watching upon a case and a piece of evidence, that we don't make our own conclusions based on our own experiences, our own codings, our own offences, our own hurts. I tend to only bring a challenge to someone when I've experienced it myself, when I've witnessed it myself, and when I have enough evidence that I could absolutely throw this down in court. I'm coming with evidence. I'm coming with specific dialogue. I'm coming with things that are challenging and have caused great hurt to someone. Now, with that, I'm giving a chance for it to change. I'm giving a chance for that person in authority to go and then have conversations with people that need to correct their behavior, or at best, apologize for their behavior. If that comes back with deflection, refusing to even have those conversations, and refusal to acknowledge that this other person might actually have a point, especially if there are 10, 20, 30 other people that have experienced the same thing, then, and that is met with deflection, or again, someone's called demonic, or they're accused of being bitter. Well, who's in the wrong now? Someone that gave the evidence, or someone that's labeling them as something? And so what can happen is that just because I've brought this to the table and brought you evidence doesn't mean I'm trying to be accusatory. I'm bringing you something that has caused an awful lot of pain, just not towards me, but to many other people. And if you want us to be in your world, this has to change. The problem that we have is then people just completely cut out or isolate themselves. They don't want the challenge. They don't want to change. They don't want to be told that they're wrong. And especially in the church sphere, we're a lot less likely to be able to take feedback well because we're all based on a moral compass of some kind. I think in regards to how do we navigate that communication, we start with questions. We ask things that have room to change our mind. And if we're coming in with a very clear-cut decision of it's a choice that you're making, so that's it, that's how, you're not really giving room for the complexities nor the compassion that could come into these particular spheres of horror.
What would it mean to reimagine how church is done and fix the broken systems? No more performing, no more protecting power at the top or prioritizing the platform over people. What if the answer is a church that rebuilds trust from the ground up, where faith is a refuge, power is shared, and leaders truly listen, owning their mistakes and welcoming voices that push back? Because if the church wants to be the hope of the world, it must first learn to tell the truth about itself. Thank you for listening to The News and You. Your support means the world. If you believe in the work we do at The News and You, sign up to our Patreon. It really is the best way to keep this going and be part of the Newsies community. I'd be so grateful if you can share the love by leaving a rating and review. It'll help spread these stories even further. What are your key takeaways? If this story impacted you or even made you see the world a little differently, why not share it with your friends and family? Until next time, remember, your story matters, and there's a shared truth behind everything.